visa, but you must go together. Buy us a visa. Hey.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, dear brothers and sisters, welcome to this MenEngage Africa Symposium. And I think you all have the right to congratulate yourselves to be in what is a history-making symposium. This symposium builds on a message that in addressing the huge challenges of HIV/AIDS, gender-based violence and other exclusion of women from public life, that we have to simultaneously address the question of, if you want, what is sometimes said the perpetrators of domestic violence, but they are our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, our nephews, and the obligation that faces us and that is reflected in the MenEngage Alliance is an obligation that says that we also have to deal with the issues of masculinity and how it's constructed and why men abuse, why men behave in the way that they do. Men are either part of the problem or part of the solution. We cannot have those that are not abusers, for example, saying, well, I wash my hands off the issue and it's not my issue.
We have brought different people from across the continent, particularly from civil society, the MenEngage network, and the biggest mixture of men and women that is talking or that is looking at how we can work collaboratively together.
Men don't lose their manhood when they change nappies, and we actually can do it. And it would be interesting if we could figure out ways that we convince more men that those simple acts of caregiving can be quite transformative in terms of how children look at the world, in terms of how men look at the world, and in terms of how women look at men and what men can do as partners.
A group of positive fathers came and said, the men, when women were talking to their husband partners at home and said, trying to encourage them. And we know in PMTCT that we need both the father and the mother to come for counseling. So this group of men got together, and within Mama's Club, we now have what we call the father mentors. And they call themselves the Fathers Brigade Against HIV/AIDS, to talk to men and say, hey, this is the thing, this disease, HIV/AIDS, affects both the man and the woman, so you all have to work together.
Priorities, GBV, involvement of men in HIV programming, empowerment of men, human rights, male engagement in family planning, addressing the needs of sexual minorities, LGBTI transformative programming, reinforcing existing laws to support sexual minorities.
So we also have to get programs that bring men to not just to justify for what they are doing, but how do we help them to get out of that situation and also place ourselves in the position of what is a man facing. So then we are able to bring them into family planning programs, into being caregivers, into being responsible fathers, and being good communicators with their spouse. Talking about equitable something, you wrote it down, equitable empowerment and involvement of men and women.
Exactly.
I think we just changed the language.
Thank you. The purpose of the alliance is to strengthen the civil society. I'm so happy all the ideas are exactly addressing our program that we are having.
So I'm suggesting a one-year plan. This morning we talk about working under pressure. We have to stop that, otherwise we'll do things haphazardly.
From Soccer Gender Justice Network in South Africa.
Why do I do the work that I do, I want to say that I have personal interest. I'm raising 3 children. So I'm doing this work to ensure that we create an environment conducive for my boy when he walks the street of Symposium to be able to respect women. I'm doing this work so that Sponganjalo and Latino are able to walk without fear of being raped or molested. So I have selfish interest. When women see this way, patriarchy, in its essence, it oppresses us. Because you can't come to terms with your own vulnerabilities as a man. Once it's very important to argue, to philosophize, to write, and these things are nice to underpin, the philosophy behind this work. For me, is to going down the street. In the ANC, we used to say, "A luta continua," the struggle continues.
We are an anti-sexist men's platform which is advocating for gender justice in Zimbabwe. We discuss ways that men can participate in promoting women's rights and the emancipation of women within their communities. At the heart of the work that we do is the concept of redefining masculinity. So we are always interrogating what it really means to be men. 5 of our networks, we call them our practical intervention networks. These provide men with a platform to be involved in care work. And these men are providing community home-based care services.
Our approach has been to gradually do this work with traditional leaders, with a view finally to make them to come around and see things the way we see them. But for me, and I want to caution, is not to be prescriptive, but to be descriptive of what we want to achieve. Because when we begin to be prescriptive, then there's a possibility that you may alienate people that you want them to be your allies.
The idea of a regional institute is particularly interesting because we all know that the biggest gap we've got in policy formation sometimes is research, skills and agendas. If we can benefit from the skills base in South Africa and spread that into the region, that's going to have a massive impact.
Young men from initiation schools are raping women as if it's something normal in our communities. Then when they go to prison, the government is ready with projects. And yet there is no program for victims.
I don't ever want to stand on a platform and say that we should be soft on rapists, but I do think that it's very important that we understand rape as being a complex problem. Rape that's predominantly a problem that initially is being perpetrated by men actually in their teenage years, a lot of whom are children, technically, when they rape. And actually, we can't deal with it by just locking people up. And if we lock men up in prison, where we know that prison is an extraordinarily brutalising experience, we cannot expect them to be socially integrated and acceptable members of the community when we let them out of jail. And if we don't give them skills training and education in prison, what are they going to do? We're going to let them out of jail and they're going to have nothing. You can't and you wouldn't want to put 1 in 4 men in jail. And given that the majority of men who we're looking at who've raped have raped before the age of 20, we have to think about not only strategies for rape prevention, but the ages at which we target our rape prevention.
One of the challenges becomes, as they become involved in our groups, I've got a sense of status, I've got access to a bush wife, I've got access to sexual favors, I've got power, even if it's behind a gun. How do you convince me to go back to a world that says you're going to be a young man who's not very much socially recognized in your community?
To me, equality is treating another person as you are. Looking at another person as you are. You put yourself into the shoe of that person and see the thing